Welcome, everyone, to Defender Fridays, your weekly rendezvous, the forefront of information security. I'm Matt. I do not look like Eric Capuano at all, and that's a good thing because Eric is a much better looking guy than I am. But I am here to fill in for Eric this week, part of the dedicated Lima Charlie team. It's my pleasure to be here with everyone. The goal of these sessions is to dive into the world of information security, exploring the defensive side, not the pointy tip side, but the shield side with seasoned folks. We've got an awesome guest today. Our aim is simple but ambitious. I want this to be a collaborative space. Ideas flow freely. We talk about experiences, knowledge expands. Every week, we've got some amazing guests lined up. Quite a few of them are actually sitting on the panelist board right now, maybe is the word I'm going to say. Or something like that, only because it's an ever-changing dynamic set of Zoom cameras. But nonetheless, we've got topics ranging from threat hunting, incident response, security operations. Security operations is going to be one of our big ones today, detection engineering. And more importantly, we like to make these a very interactive space. Our guest today is a guy, I got to give him the right introduction because first off, Christopher Crowley is someone I've known for quite a while. And I'm just going to tell you, I have had experiences with Chris in New Orleans, Las Vegas, Washington, D.C., Canberra, Australia. We've done things all around the globe, and it's been awesome. Chris, it's great to have you here today. How are you doing, sir?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing well. I'm trying to remember all the different spots. I don't remember Canberra. What did we do in Canberra? Were we staying at the Realm Hotel?
We visited an establishment. After
called the White Rabbit.
Yes. There we go. I didn't.
Right, so I guess I do kind of remember it.
Yeah, and then we also, as weird as this sounds, everyone, Chris is a Canberra sushi aficionado. I mean, the guy was like, "Hey, you want to go grab some sushi?" And I was like, "In the middle of winter in Canberra, sure." And he was like, "Yeah, I know this spot." And we went sushi dumplings. It was amazing, but. Chris, I can start off by introducing you as a very avid world traveler, someone who not only travels the world, but actually experiences the world as well, which is one of the cool things. However, being this is Defender Fridays, I'll let you introduce yourself. And then I think today we've got some security operations discussions as well. But
all I want to talk about is cocktails, actually, Matt.
Yes. Love it. Even
it's
better.
Friday, it's 1:30 where I am, so it's
even better. All right, then. Well, for anyone who was listening, we're going to keep it relevant.
So to introduce myself, I've been working in cyber for like 20 years. And it's something where I started in cyber because our Solaris boxes were getting kicked over. So to kind of put it in context, nice. I implemented an anti-spam system for Tulane University when I was working there as a contractor because people started reporting, "Hey, it's weird. I'm getting emails from people I don't know."
Oh my goodness.
So that was my start in cyber. But my start in computers was when I was 15 and I ran tape backup on Ultrix and VMS systems where I grew up in Massachusetts because my dad was like, "You need to get a job. Here, let me get you a job." And so I went and interviewed with these nerds when I was 14. And they were fairly impressed by me at 14. I didn't get the job the first time I interviewed for it. The second time I interviewed for it, they basically messaged me and they're like, "Hey, we're going to open that job again." The guy that we hired last year was a senior in high school. And since you'll be a sophomore in high school next year.
Sucks when that underpaid labor graduates,
Yeah, exactly. It was great. Actually, that was I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but I will say, if you've ever heard of a company called Bolt, Beranek and Newman, BBN, based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, it was one of the very early ISPs. I started working. I literally started my IT career with a bunch of people who had left BBN because it had gotten too corporate in the 80s, you know what I mean? So it's like,
dang,
there are some things that explain why I am like I am, and that's a pretty good one. So I think what we want to talk about is actually what I want to talk about is the SOC survey. Which is one of the things that I do for research to try to help me help people to help them understand what they should be doing in their cybersecurity operations stuff. So I've written this for the last 7 years. I first wrote it in 2017. Every year except for 2020, it's been like in coordination with the SANS Institute. 2020, they were like, oh, things are a little weird this year. We're not going to do it. So I was like, well, I'm going to do it by myself. I'm just going to do it. And so I actually did it independently. And what was really interesting about that is I had been sort of fighting essentially to release the entire data set because this guy asked me in 2018, actually, hey, I really only want to see the stuff about large entities in the financial sector. Can you just give me that data so I can then do some permutations on the analysis that you did, sort of focused on my sector and peers? And so I was like, no, sorry, I can't. But then I went back to SANS and I was like, hey, this is actually a totally valid request. Let's just go ahead and do this. And so in 2020, when I did it by myself, I released the data and I released a Jupyter Lab notebook that went along with the data analysis that I did, because that's where I did the analysis. So since 2020, every year now, the data set gets released too. It's de-identified. I eliminate the columns that I know have identifiable data, and then I review all the other free format input stuff. And then I basically, release it, plus the Jupyter Lab notebook. Because people always ask me like, hey, what happens in Asia Pacific for like this thing? Well, go answer it yourself, because I want to do it. But so I've also built sort of like the way that people could do that themselves in Python. And so I've shared a lot of that. It really is pretty insightful. It's not authoritative in the sense that like I have a full sampling of the population globally. I don't know how many I don't know how many SOCs there are even in the world. Does anyone know how many SOCs, security operations centers, there are in the world?
Simultaneously, too many and not enough.
Well, yeah, it's kind of weird, right? But it's like I can't say that anything is statistically relevant, because I don't even know where to start on like how many there are. So I do actually have some speculation on this, and it's in the millions is my guess. And that's
number of SOCs or number of SOC analysts?
Number of cybersecurity operations centers.
Wow.
I really do think so. But that's a fraction of the percentage of companies that exist. Right. I mean, and so it's like it's kind of derived from some numbers from different places. And I've got somewhere in something I wrote, I've got like my rationale for what that speculation is. But it is it's fascinating, right? Because we don't even know that. And that is a tough thing where I'm trying to do a sampling and I'm getting hundreds of people responding, which is great. It's great, but still, it's like that's only like a very narrow sort of band of what's out there. The other thing that's interesting about it from the population selection, because I'm talking about the survey stuff, is when in 22 or 21, SANS offered it in Portuguese and in Spanish. It actually totally shifted the demographic to the second most popular headquarter location. All of a sudden became South America, because we were offering it in Portuguese and Spanish. And so I also compelled them, one point I convinced them to do it in Japanese. Whole bunch of people responded to the Japanese survey. Because if English isn't your first language and you're being asked these sort of like complicated,
right, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate your firewall in English? That's a daunting question. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. But it's actually a pretty involved survey. People say to me that they learn a lot just by taking the survey.
Yeah,
because it really challenges people on stuff. So
my favorite part, and I want to hear, Chris, about how you go about tackling this, but my favorite part of surveys are when you see the answer at the bottom, which is like unknown. And I tend to always zoom in on the unknown as like, if I'm taking an information security survey and there's a question such as, let's keep it simple, right? Do you have an asset classification system? I have no clue. Unknown.
Yeah.
That's like a wake up moment right there, or at least it should be of like, wait a second, they're asking about this thing. I don't even know if I have it,
Yeah,
right? Let alone know its importance.
for sure. And actually a good one for that is there are two questions on technology
Mhm.
in use. I think that now I have like 50 different line items in that for you to say, do you use it? Is it deployed in production? And do you like it on an A through F kind of ranking? And I
Mm.
keep kind of like adding to that list, but it's pretty good in terms of where it's at right now. But I have it sectioned off into like network, host based, analysis. So like the SIM is in analysis, and machine learning is in analysis, and it's like
Yep.
all that kind of stuff. And it's fascinating just to see what people do with that. And every year there's sort of like a top of the pile, bottom of the pile. Last year it was the EDR. People really liked that, and people really disliked machine learning. And the other one that was a big one that people have generally disliked is the deception stuff.
Really?
Oh yeah, people are ranking that really low. Um,
Wow. Interesting.
in terms of their satisfaction with it.
Hmm.
It's pretty low in terms of satisfaction. Yeah, I'm flipping to a chart. So you can ask me another question while I find the chart so I can get
Yeah,
there.
no worries. I'm actually Whitney called out exactly what I was like, I find that to be surprising. Only because, and perhaps it's a smaller crowd, but every time I talk to someone about deception technologies, like, oh, this thing is amazing. And now I'm wondering if I've actually reached the entire user base of that tool because
Well,
they're the
Well,
ones.
another thing about that. So we asked the question around technology in two different ways, which is like, how much do you like it? And then
Mhm.
how far have you deployed it? And
Okay.
so the deployment is in like is in a production fully, production partially, and so on.
Mhm.
And what tends to happen is that people say that they like the technologies more that have been more fully deployed to production, which
Mhm.
it's kind of a chicken and egg problem to some degree. But it seems like if stuff gets fully deployed, then people are like, yeah, okay, this is good. And it
Mhm.
also suggests that in terms of a technology deployment, you're going to stop early if it starts to cause problems and friction for you. And so then
Mhm.
it'll never get there. Like if it's not doing what you want it to do, you're not going to keep fighting to put it on every single host.
Yeah. I
So it's
I hear like an interesting juxtaposition there, which is like some of this stuff is only effective at scale, but it's like, it wasn't
fair enough.
effective at a
Yeah.
small scale, so we're not going to take it to a large scale. And it's like, no, it needs to be large scale.
Yep. Yeah, and
Interesting.
there's chatter, people putting stuff in the chat that I'm trying to keep up with while looking at this other report and talk to
Mhm.
you. And it's like
I know
the thing about
we need
cultural
chameleon eyes
implications.
on
Yeah,
Defender Fridays to be watching all
yeah.
of these for sure. I'm gonna actually Vincent in the chat just brought up an awesome point, which Chris, I hopefully you're reading and is kind of tied
Mhm,
into what folks are saying here.
mhm.
Maybe it's a point of discussion, maybe you've got some empirical evidence behind it or data behind it, but how much does culture, or how much do you think culture impacts SOCs in different parts of the world? I I have a few thoughts, but I want to hear yours first.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I want to comment on something you said. Empirical data. These are survey responses.
No, yeah, right. Sorry, you're right. Yeah, good call. Sorry, my
So
bad. My bad. Yeah, you're right.
so, which I love data, but these are
Yep, yep.
people's opinions.
Two
So,
point, 2 point.
and I think it's really important to talk about it. So then the second part is of culture. So long answer to this. I actually talk a lot about organizational culture, and I use this guy's vocabulary to talk about. His name's Jort Hofstede. He worked for IBM. He has a thing called cultural dimensions, which he released some stuff around that when he was working for IBM. And then later, after he left IBM, he wrote some stuff on organizational
Mm,
cultural dimensions. And so like these are useful things. And it's just basically like a slider. You're either very like internally motivated as an organization or externally motivated as an organization. And I think that this actually has a huge influence on what the SOC ends up doing for an organization. Okay. So that's the organizational structure is a part of it. And then there's the cultural implications of people as a group, in terms of the implications of it. And it's pretty tough in a very hierarchical society, to be able to go and tell an executive that they did something wrong and their system's compromised by phishing. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that culture actually plays a big part in that sort of stuff, of handling, of addressing things, and so on. And then the different SOCs in different regions need to be able to adapt their procedures and methodologies in order to do that. Okay.
Yeah.
So then there's the culture of the people, and then there's the culture of the company. And I think both of them end up getting accounted for in the security operations that gets deployed. And this gets reflected in architecture, it gets reflected in hiring, it gets reflected in technology selection, and so on.
I'll throw another wrench into that SOC engine, only because I've experienced this one firsthand. I won't name which cultures, but some of you watching can probably fill in the blanks here. However, I will say in other parts of the world, it's very traditional for maybe a certain demographic to fill positions, non-management positions, and then management positions are reserved or often saved for, natives, folks who are from that particular region. So there's a worker class and then a high, I'm going to call it a managerial white collar class, if you will. And I've worked through this scenario where you could have the smartest SOC analyst in the world, whatever metric you want to use, the smartest SOC analyst in the world. The management could not care less about their opinion, just because of a cultural difference, a cultural divide there of, no, you're not from this area. So therefore, please, submit the report and click the alert button, but you're good to go. But I find that's kind of where my head went when I heard that question, because I think your answer was actually a better way of breaking it down and kind of looking at the company versus the people. I think that was a really cool thing. I apologize. I think you were looking at pulling a chart up, or you had something else you wanted to refer to.
No, I was just saying, like, I'm trying to make sure I say the right things from the survey and look at all the different charts, because I don't have it memorized.
No worries. No worries. What else? So I'm not sure. Are you able to share any results? Anything catch you off guard this year? Or is it?
So the stuff that I think is really interesting, just that jumps out to me. One is, everyone keeps saying they're going to a cloud deployed SOC, like cloud native SOC, blah, blah, blah. Everyone keeps saying that's our plan for the next 12 months. And the results show that they don't. So it's like everyone has it on the plan and it's not really moving that direction. So that's a thing that I find kind of interesting. Yeah. And I mean, it's like, they're looking at it and they're looking for ways to move there, but they don't. And now this isn't purely survey stuff, but this is also the work that I do, because I do maturity assessments for SOCs, and I do consulting engagements and a bunch of other things, and I do some of those, like, you lightweight 1 hour, they bring me in and people throw darts at me. I think they call it Stump the Chump is the name of the exercise. And so it's like, they just start asking me questions about like all sorts of things. And I'm like, that wasn't what I signed up for. Anyway. Yeah. So, as this is proceeding, everyone is always looking for, like, what's the better SIM for me? How do I aggregate? See, Eric, how do I aggregate the SIM and the SOAR and the and then 15 other technologies in terms of implementation of it and so on. And I do kind of feel like the SIM space is really moving toward it's going to be a bunch of data in the cloud. I really think that that's where it's going, and I think that the security operations teams are going to have a terrible time actually making that real. And I think that it's very difficult for people to absorb that new reality. And what's going to make it more tolerable for them is when, and this is my opinion, again, it's not derived from the survey, but that's at least some of my data points, is when they finally sort of acknowledge the notion that, like, a lot of the stuff that we do is the same as everybody else, and we can actually have massive value from just like taking the standards and like doing those in a standard way, right? So I think that that's something that is actually coming. So CISA logging made easy. Yeah, I actually think that there is a large number of standard logging to detection type deployments that can be there. And I will say that that's great, but the part that's really missing out of this, like, okay, here's the easy part, is you still actually need to hunt. Because even if you set up the logging right and you set up your detection properly and you have analysts who are actually looking at it, stuff's going to get missed for reasons, right? And it doesn't matter what the reasons are. You still actually need to go and review the data, and you need people to look at that data in ways that is novel, related to the detections, so that you have a verification. This can be done in a sampling mechanism. This can be done in a review mechanism. This can be done in a hunting mechanism. But it's like, guess what? The alerts don't always work. And you could have everything set up and it just didn't work right. Why? That's the way it goes. So until we get to the point where everything is actually vetted and tested, and we have high confidence that it always works, well, then you also need the corresponding hunting stuff, which means people. And so it's like, this is another big missing part, that organizations don't want to swallow that reality. And so it's like, yeah, make everything easy, but it's not enough to do that. That's the kind of the aspect that I see a lot of people just neglecting to do. Sorry, another quick story. I did a consulting engagement at the beginning of last year for a managed service provider that was looking to add managed security service capability to their offering. No surprise, the reason why they were looking to add managed security service to their offering was they got wrecked by an intrusion and like nearly lost their business because, and then 6 weeks of incident handling, dealing with the whole mess, everything needed to be rebuilt, all that kind of stuff. This is a standard story in the incident handling world. We see this, and then all of a sudden the organization's like, we want to do security, which is totally fine. I mean, but it's usually what it takes to get people to get to the point where they're actually going to do it. So then this entity was trying to build their own SOC. And so then they brought me in for this. I did a private of my SOC class to help them do that. And it was like, I saw the lights switching on after like the first 3 hours of me talking to this team of people. And then I saw the depression set in of like, this is going to be a lot of work to actually do this. Like, we were just planning on doing the, like, here's the SIM, put it in, we're good. And that's not actually going to fly. Right.
No,
and so,
no, sir.
and that hurts too, because, I also, unfortunately, they had me where I'm like, I don't care. Who do you want me to tell this to? I'll go tell them. But it's like, essentially, this the CISO who brought me in, and the conversation with the CIO and all that stuff, they were kind of like, are you telling us we really need to do this? And I'm like, yes, because this is actually the path of the most pain up front and the most stability for the long term for you and your customers. And I mean, I help them to prioritize. I help them to direct it. I help them to do the technology selection and the procedural sort of build out and all that stuff. But it's like, they were just looking at me like, we thought you were coming in to make it easy for us, and you're making it hard for us. And I'm like, well, making it hard up front for you.
Right.
Because if you don't do the hard up front, then you're going to end up, having to deal with that difficulty in the long term, and it'll never be tenable for you to actually run it.
Yeah. Do you want to solve the wrong easy problem or the right hard problem?
Right. Exactly. And it was
Jeff's
really
been
funny
here before
because I joke about this all the time, but I'm like, everybody says, okay, let's build a SOC. Let me go buy a SIM. and then we'll figure out what we can do with it.
Yeah.
And they had already done that. Like they had literally already done that.
Well, Leonard pointed out the right key there, which is just dashboards and aggregations are all you need. You're good to go, right? There's
Totally
some Christmas trees, donut chart, high, medium, low, and you're set.
But it's really interesting. I have another company that I'm working with at the moment, very high performing entity, lots of capability, lots of investment. And what's really interesting is they have so many good things, but I'm actually working with a technology specific engineer that I brought in to help them to fix their donut charts, because they had donut charts, but it's like the donut charts weren't really great for them. And they're like so close. You know what I mean? It's like they have so much stuff and they've done so much work, and they also were just missing the mark like everywhere. So it's like, oh, okay, so let's fix this little part. Let's fix that little part. So even with the entities that have the funding, that have the right architecture, that have the concept, they still also need all of that like constant rebalancing and recasting of what needs to happen. Right.
Yeah.
So it's,
I was going to say that's, like I'm still trying to put together, and let me make sure I understood this correctly. This MSP got impacted by an incident, and then decided to become an MSSP because of it. Is there a little bit of, I don't want to say hubris there, but is there a little bit of like, we got impacted by this thing, now we're going to make a service out of it?
Well, let me put it this way.
Yeah.
Essentially what they did was they were like, we have to implement all these security controls. We're going to do a bunch of them for our customers anyway.
Yep.
And then on top of that, we need to offer something to make it so that it's affordable for us to do it as a MSP. Right. So it's like, they were like, okay, here's where this is going to be. Everybody's going to get these baseline capabilities. Now we need to add this as an offering just from a financial viability perspective. I mean, in business, you're like, I'm running IT stuff. Great. Now you've been doing this for a while and you're making money and everything's good. And then all of a sudden something hits you that you didn't anticipate was going to hit you. And now you have to refactor all of your capabilities in order to add all this additional overhead, to add all this additional monitoring. So they're like, as a business, just looking at it of how do we integrate this? How do we do this? And how do we make it financially viable for us to add 30% work? Like we're adding load to ourselves where we didn't have that before. How are we going to survive as a business? And this quite honestly is the question that everybody faces. And sorry, let me one quick
no, you're good. Go ahead.
Digression back to the survey is I ask about budgeting a bunch. Like, how do you win money to be able to actually get this security stuff? Because it's all basically a cost center for the organization. Security only costs stuff and then offers the promise of potential loss prevention.
Yeah.
Or
but we stop fishes. I can't tell you how many, but we stopped them.
So that's why you need the donut hole.
That's awesome. Chris, we are just about right at time. I want to say a huge thanks. I feel bad because I think I speak on behalf of everyone who's on here right now. We could probably go another 7 hours having this conversation and keep talking. This is so awesome and enthralling, but huge thanks for joining us. I want to give you the last 30 seconds or so. Is there anywhere we can go to find out more about this year's survey or what you're dropping?
Yeah. So SOC-survey.com. The current one just got released for people to take it. Okay. So please take that. There are a bunch of links there. That one URL gets you to all of the previous report URLs, the data that I've released, and to take the 24 one. So
good stuff. That's awesome. Chris, thank you so much. Everyone,
Thanks
this has been really another amazing edition.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to me for 30 minutes. I know.
It wasn't enough time. I'm going to find a way to get even more time out of this because this is a fantastic discussion. And Chris, your insight is super valuable. So thank you very much. And thanks everyone for joining us here as always. And we look forward to having you back next week as well. That's Defender Fridays.
Cocktails next time.
Take care, everyone.
There we go. Thanks, Chris.
Bye, friends.
See you, everybody.